Hello Year 10. I'm going to attempt to do rivers in around about 5 minutes here, so bear with me. So, rivers is a very important topic. It links lovely into coasts, and there's many different things to remember. First of all, as you can see here, this shows the long profile at the top and the cross profile at the bottom, showing you how a river changes going downstream. As a river goes downstream, it gets deeper, wider, and faster. Now in the upper course you get features like waterfalls that are formed from vertical erosion, and there's often V-shaped valleys in these steep areas where the water goes over the edge as a vertical drop and erodes the rock below it, the soft rock, faster than the hard rock, and collapses into a plunge pool, leaving a gorge behind. And interlocking spurs here are these hard pieces of rock sticking out into the river that the river decides to go around rather than straight through, because as I said before, it's hard rock, so it takes the easier option and erodes through the softer rock instead. As you can see in this picture, there are often V-shaped valleys too. As you head to the middle course, you have oxbow lakes and meanders. These bends in the river are caused by erosion and deposition, and again going around harder and softer rock, and these are changing all the time due to various erosion, depositional and flooding processes. For example, as you can see here, on the inside bends you have slower, more deposition, and often you get slip-off slopes. On the outside bends it's faster, there's more friction, and you're going to get things called river cliffs. Often, as you saw from the cross-section, the river is deeper at the outside because of erosion and more shallow on the inside bends where B's are here. As you can see, material builds up. And in the lower course, the river is at its widest, its deepest and its fastest because erosion on the outside is high, but look at the amount of water in the middle there that flows through without really being slowed down or stopped. So you get wider rivers here heading out into the ocean. You also get things like levees that build up over floods. So sediment during a flood gets stuck on the lip of a river, and as this builds up over time, basically the banks increase in height. So you get before flood, during a flood, after a flood here. This is a very important process to revise. You also get floodplains, which are basically flat areas of land next to a river that flood. And it's obviously flat because it's in the lower course, and the river's at its widest and deepest. And then before you get to the mouth, at the end of the river, you get deltas and estuaries, both heading out into the ocean, as you can see from the right-hand side, the estuary there. But yeah, these are the lower course features of a river. Just remember some key terms like drainage basin, source and mouth, things like that. In a river, you have 4 different methods of transportation, so how sediment is transported in a river. Suspension is where it's carried and suspended in the river. Solution is where it's dissolved. Traction is where it rolls on the floor. And saltation is where it bounces. The type of transportation you get depends on the energy of the river. So obviously the more water there is, the faster it's going, the more energy there is, and the size of the sediment, how heavy it is. And then you have 4 types of erosion. So like coastal erosion, you have hydraulic action or hydraulic impact, same thing, where the water smashes against the sides of the river. Attrition, where the rocks bounce into each other. Solution, where it dissolves. And abrasions, where rocks and sediment roll and scrape along the sides and the bottom of the riverbed, as you can see here in this diagram. Before we get onto floods, here we have a hydrograph, a storm hydrograph, where you can see different points which are important to remember. The blue bars are rainfall, and the lines, like the black line, is the discharge. That's the amount of water going through a river at any particular point at any particular time. This increases, as you can see, with the rising limb during a flood, and decreases. The lag time is the difference between the highest peak rainfall and peak discharge. There's things you can do to tackle floods. For example, nice soft engineering, things like here, planting trees obviously reduces flood risk, but also land use zoning. And there's also hard engineering strategies you can do as well. Levees, embankments, straightening and deepening the river, dams and flood walls. And it's important to also know a case study for a river. We looked at multiple, but for example the River Tees here you can see going from the upper course, middle course and lower course. Some other really important bits to consider is weathering and mass movement. So weathering is the decay and disintegration of rock, similar to erosion, but actually this can happen by physical, otherwise known as mechanical, chemical and biological processes. Physical is often freeze-thaw action, exfoliation and reduction of pressure. So basically where rocks break down because of heat, water, ice and pressure. Freeze-thaw is the easiest one to remember for that. Chemical is basically acid rain, to be honest, where chemicals in the rain dissolve rocks, and biological, and also carbonation and oxidation, by the way. But biological is where something living damages rocks, so an animal or a plant can get through. Then you have these ideas of mass movement, where there's a huge amount of mass movement down the hill, often because of gravity influenced by that. Then you have key ones like soil creep and slumping, all types of movement. Down we go. I then taught you about water uses, demand and supply. So physical water scarcity, economic water scarcity, having a deficit, having a surplus, and about how most of the water in the world is salt water, 97%, 3% of it is fresh water, and we use water for different things like domestic in our houses, but also industry and also for farming. So this varies depending on if you're a rich or a poor country. If you're a poor country, normally you have things like appropriate technology, which is simple equipment to help save water. And in richer countries, you have often maybe more bigger irrigation systems where you can take water from a river and use it on your farmland, maybe slightly further away. Obviously, know the water cycle. That's quite important to remember. The world's water consumption is quite important to remember, and about how we measure how much we use, and about how this varies over time and how it's going to vary going forward, because obviously we are running out of water. The Ogallala is one of the world's largest aquifers. An aquifer being a natural underground rock structure that holds water, so we can use things like that to conserve it. And that was an example of how maybe we can save water, and how there is water shortages in poorer countries and what they need to do to basically help that issue. Because obviously there's certain countries like poorer countries that haven't got access to loads of water, whereas richer countries can use it to water golf courses and have swimming pools, for example. And in terms of anything else I recommend you need to know, just have an example of an LIC and HIC, and about how they use water and how it affects them. So we did look at different examples of countries. Bangladesh and Malawi, for example, we kind of grazed upon, the same as the UK for a HIC example. We even looked at the Ellen Valley Water Transfer Scheme in the UK as a way of getting water to people who need it. But yeah, there's lots of the stuff on Nigeria for the LIC example, lots of stats that you could use in an 8-marker about how they're dealing with any water crisis. And then, yes, don't forget about flooding as well. So flooding can happen if there's a lot of rain, if the river hasn't been dredged in a long time, if the river fills up very quickly, if the area has been urbanized and trees are cut down, deforested. These things actually increase things like surface runoff and increase the impermeability of the ground below it, which means water can't go into the ground and soak in, or it gets saturated if it's been raining for a long time. Lots of different factors for flooding. It can be high intense rainfall, it can be urbanization, things like that. So have examples of that ready. I taught you about Boscastle in the UK. It's the one I learned about how that happened very quickly due to a number of factors like heavy rainfall, high relief, where it's very, very steep around the area, having impermeable ground like urbanization, a confluence of two rivers. Confluence is where two rivers meet. A tributary is obviously a smaller side river. So key terms like that are important to know as well. Effects and responses too. And that is basically rivers. Along with the hard and soft engineering stuff we ended the topic on, I would just make sure you practice exam questions. I know I've gone over 5 minutes here, but this is a very small snapshot of rivers.